Good morning, students. Today we are going to start Ozymandias. Ozymandias, once you get past the title, is one of the most profound and fascinating poems written in English language. So join me today where we are going to do a reading summary analysis of Percy Bysshe Shelley's wonderful poem Ozymandias. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, two vast and trunkless flags of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lips and sneer of cold command tell that its sculpture, well, those passions red, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that marked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, the King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty and despair. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare. The lone and level sand stretch far away. So, in this poem that has been described, Ozymandias, a king of kings. So in this poem it is quite a tough poem, and let's see what steps we can take. Exactly, this poem is talking about the first of Ozymandias, whose another name was Ramses II, and he was the pharaoh of Egypt and had quite a long reign. If you look, there nearly 80 years, and he fought many wars. He was a successful military ruler, and maybe because of that he really liked having statues of himself being built, and that's what this poem is depicting. A traveler describing a broken statue of Ramses II, or as they would have referred to him during Romantic English. Ozymandias to this poem is a sonnet. Sonnet is a poem which do have 14 lines, and technically a Petrarchan sonnet. It's having iambic pentameter. I met from an antique land, so as some really specific structure is given there, to which I find interesting because the poem is about the destruction of the structure of a statue. It's about the deconstructing this statue out in the desert, and yet the words of the poem stand very strong and tough. And I think that's the theme you can latch on to look at some of the poems. Shall we? Okay, I took some of the words that students usually have to look up, and I myself had to also sometimes. So I want to point out a couple of words for you. First is visage or visage, that is a face. Okay. So when we are talking about the face of the statue, we find that it's frowning. It has a wrinkled lip. It's sneering, all that sort of stuff. You can't know that without knowing what vestige means. Mocked in this sense is a very antiquated idea. It doesn't mean to make fun of the statue, broken statue. It means to depict it kind of like how we would say I'm going to draw a mock-up of something. So we are told that the sculpture's words survived, and he mocked the hand and the heart and all that sorts of stuff because he depicted them, not that he was making fun of them. And finally, colossal. So colossal basically means enormous, but it's also derived from the statue that collapsed, much like the poem, at the highly Isle of Rhodes. It's one of the ancient wonders of the world. Here is a picture of this statue. Is supposed to be grand that ships could sail underneath it, and Colossus of Rhodes in Greek. So this would have been an amazing structure, and that took anyone's attention, anyone's breathe away when they saw it, and yet it no longer stands, which again I think makes it a great word to use for this poem. So what exactly does the poem means? The theme here, so walking through the kind of section by section, and first line in 2 words tell us that there is an outsider speaker or a narrator, perhaps, and they set up this frame for the story. I, the narrator, met a stranger, a traveler from an antique old land, and who said, then from there and out our word aren't the narrator, this trial. That's why we have the quotation marks in the very starting, and there now I want to skip the orange for just a second. We will get to it at the end. Already talked about the descriptions of the face Ramses II, and here Ozymandias is described with a frown and a wrinkled lip and a sneer of cold command. He is a dictator, and P.B. Shelley hates dictators. You can compare this asana to his other famous sonnets. Well, one of his famous on its England 1819, where he is talking about his ruler King George III of England. So Shelley is a pretty messed up guy in lot of senses, but one thing you can really commend him for, it is the feels like people should be able to rule themselves, and that's why he is here, belittling Ozymandias here. After that we get the sculpture of the statue, and the sculpture of the statue was right, and his passions survived. So here where the life of the poem is the words survive longer than the statue itself. And what are those words specifically? They are, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty and despair. It's also having the pompous inscriptions on the pedestal of the statue. And yet, if it look at the orange, the poem is a sort of bookend. And here, this is the irony of the destruction of the statue of Ozymandias. It is just 2 vast trunkless legs, and all this survives is the legs and then a face. So a face that is half sunk into the sand, and there in the desert, all around sand, and sand is there, nothing at the end of the poem, nothing beside remains. There is decay, and even though Ozymandias capitalizes the W of works, Shelley's, or the speaker capitalizes the W of rack. So Ozymandias thought that his works would last forever, this powerful ruler, and yet he has left with a boundless bare rack, and there is just sand for miles and miles. It's quite a sobering idea, and if I want to return to the real quick, the word colossal, I just think it's such a great word to use here, because most of you probably had an idea what colossal meant, but you might not have known that it is derived from colossus of Rhodes. So here we see that the word has outlived the statue, and that really fits for that with Shelley's ideas, and the sculpture is depicted in a positive sense, and the inscription survives even though the statue doesn't make a lot of sense, since Shelley is a poet and he famously said that poets should be legislating or making the laws and showing people how to live, not dictators. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed the poem in a well manner. It shows all influences are shown all over the places of these 2 instances, and we came to know that Ozymandias was really a haughty king, and even his works were not having the long lasting effect there on all the people there in the society. So this is up to here, the Ozymandias is up to here, and I hope you all have really enjoyed the new words given there in this summary. So goodbye. Have a